Well, good afternoon. I thought we might talk about the Earth fire, our planet's response to this time of the dance of dragon and beast, heron and serpent, father and son, Yahweh and Asherah, lion and bull, Era and Ishum. As far as I can tell, what we always considered hell, a terrible dark place of unbelievable torment, is actually a time in our very near future that we've been ignoring. When Hey Aquarius is displaced first by Aries, then Orion, then Leo, then Virgo, and theoretically, this roll is set to begin around the vernal equinox. And who knows how long it takes. Near as I can tell, the pole is set to move around 3,000 miles in about 70 days, but whether that's in small increments or two large ones, I can't tell you. The long and the short of it is that the equinoxes are supposed to trade places. The stone is Mississippian. It's the most obvious reference to the earth fire I've found. It represents Turtle Island or America around the time Redhorn rises. The zodiac and sky spin like a whirlwind or Taurus. Um, Dragon and serpent fall with the sky. And I know it's confusing. One of the names of the dragon was Horon or Horus or Heron. They also called him a thunderbird, the hand of God, white eagle. It's like seeing Jupiter and Venus as a dragon biting his own tail, as Ouroboros, April 30th. Same day, eagle gets a serpent, blue star and red star light up, and then the world changes. The idea is that something dark comes around the time of a great light, a grand eclipse, if you will. If you read the book of Exodus, it lasts for 3 days, which sounds more than a little bit weird. In Exodus 10, we read, "And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings." I believe the Sibylline oracles in Book 1 refer to the same moment, calling it a dark, monstrous night for 3 hours in the midst of day, which is a lot longer than the usual less than 8 minutes and orders of magnitude less than 3 days. The reason for the globe is to show you the heron on Earth because he's pretty big, 2 by 3,000 miles. Take a look at the odd rift to the northeast of Australia where New Zealand is being devoured as a serpent. Can you see it? The earth is like us, putty in God's hands. That's one of the pillars of the earth, where the potter spins his wheel, call him as you might. The symbol to the upper right, I believe, is from the Maya or a related tribe. Note the Eye of Heron on top as opposed to the smaller one back in the east where we saw him February 1st. Also note the shepherd's crook in the eye of the face of God at Horon's heart. I believe that stands for Orion. And if you were to look up the symbol of Osiris, god of the underworld, you would see that Saturn is often to his right, not ours, which would basically imply a reversal of our current situation. The most important theme to this boat of the sun is the Taurus, above it looking like a winged disc, Ahura Mazda. I believe it's the resurrection of the sun coming near the first point of Aries, hence the horns of Kneph Aries on the lower left. I believe the funny rabbit ears are to signify the coming of what the Mississippians called Redhorn and Bluehorn, our anode and cathode of the earth fire. And I guess our visitor stars sport tails connecting to the earth as we fly through their interstellar debris for the next few years. Symbols of interest are the WUS scepters, objects of high energy at this time of plasma physics. We are to have extremes of darkness and light and then a brief time of reversal. Note how Anubis, Seth, or Sekhmet are handing Orion and the Red Star back and forth with Horus, or you could call him Sokar or Min. Remember the Bernie relief with Aquarius and Leo reversals? Well, it's the same thing. Inanna is saying, keep your eye on Cassiopeia. Think of Osiris Orion as engaged with Tawats, the Native American devil of Aquarius with rabbit or donkey ears. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. We are at the point where Helios, the great sun god, is to be resurrected with his three children. A cross of thorns will make sense in the hands of Osiris. Note that Saturn goes to the west as a sickle, whereas the flail of Jupiter resembles the first plows, the triangle of Aries, the first letter Aleph. Anyway, it's Amos 9:13 stuff, a season that began at the winter solstice of 2020, and now we approach the finale. Notice Aries to the ancient Sumerians was a dragon with two sets of horns for a ram and an oryx. With the phoenix above him at a moon event, the partial eclipse a few days later coincides with the rise of Red Star looking like a comet as scepters of the king. I have a video of that scepter in the hands of Seth Anubis being dug up in Mexico, and upon it is the design of Ahura Mazda. Since the scepter emerges at the time of the beam, I wonder about that serious connection for the judge. Is that how the firebringer becomes an ambiguous feline or canine, or is that different points in the same story? Like the Rock of Six Faces, if you remember that. Notice how he has to balance truth, the law of Mat, with mercy, the heart of heaven. When we see the stars of creation light up, judgment is here. The Taurus is Mexican, but it could as easily have been Hongshan in its design of Orion crossing the three stars of creation, or the axis of Aries Virgo crossing Aquarius Leo. Notice a fight of the twins, Jupiter and Saturn, bashing each other with fist axes at the Tree of Life. But you could see that as Jupiter versus Mars a little bit later. If you ever studied the artifacts of Morningstar, I think you will find him a Native American's rustic version of Thoth, the black iris or black ibis. This was just to show that ancient scepters look toroidal. They represent the club or the sword of the new king, God's representative on earth. Remember Deuteronomy 18, we're looking for a high priest like God or a king like us. The one in the middle is probably the oldest. I can't tell if the symbol of power is a snake's head or the bill of a heron. My suspicion is that it was designed to look like both, since they're both eternally joined. I'm reminded we're told to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. So Jesus knew our confusion at this moment. Here are some Mississippian designs. Top left is Grandmother Spider at the crossing. Aquarius about to be overtaken by pole shifts of Orion and Crux. On the lower left, Heron gets the serpent when Jupiter and Saturn are on opposing sides of the new house, and that's this spring. A sun with the knot of Tiet or girdle of Isis represents Earth's spin to the left when sky goes right. The timing is Orion at the stars of creation. Some symbols of the hand of God are often depicted with a hole or an eye. I also like the symbol of the Trinity expressed by the thumb and two fingers. It was used by the Sabbazians, worshiping hand of God. It also shows up on that famous Da Vinci, the Salvator Mundi. If the hand of El is the reigning house of the Zodiac, as it was when Aleph Taurus and Lamed Orion took the light, then El is about to fall over when Sirius goes off. And if I had to make a guess, I'm thinking that would be around the end of April, in time for the May Day fires. I was wondering how the ancients could possibly denote a quick passage visually. And they accomplished it with the club or mace or sword of Orion that has to swing, you know, in the opposite direction. In other words, if the ecliptic is doing a 45-degree angle, to the right, usually, well, it's going to be a 45-degree angle going the other way. On the left, you can see where the action took place 6,400 years ago at the zodiacal 9 o'clock position. That's where you can see the holes for Jupiter and Saturn. Morning star's face indicates eagle was ascendant over the serpent that day. The Oqualan stone shows the action going on above the head of Aquarius as we begin the roll of the planet this spring. Finally, the Norma palette from the Scorpion King of Egypt recalls two apocalypses. On the reverse, you have lions intertwining their necks, which recalls the Zep-Tepi, the zero time creation of 10,500 BC, when the Sphinx faced Leo for the vernal equinox at dawn. On the face, you have the Taurus reversal of 4415 BC. In 2020, the Egyptians sent out a release that Leo's tail is now where the sun sets on the vernal equinox. And what they were saying without saying it is that we're in trouble. The fourth ram is the fifth, the how is the seventh sar is now. It's time for apocalypse leading to Genesis. Göbekli Tepe and Tiwanaku tell you the same thing. On the left is Hercules' fight against the Hyades, which I believe will be the serpent falling on Eagle's Day. As Skybank's right, the eagle too will fall when we see the serpent hung up on a cross, as in Moses' day. The one in the middle is the equivalent Etruscan god for Orion, who will be activated when Mars is at the helm of Aquarius and Aries on the same day. The Etruscans called their god of war Laran, which I guess would be Lamed, Orion the shepherd, Resh, raven, N is Nun for serpent, who one day ends up on the cap of Pharaoh. Watch for the light when Orion uses a stone to sacrifice the goat of Aries and the sky swings. Watch for a little guy to supplant the big guy. Notice on Morningstar, he has that first point of Aries symbol going on, as we observed in Egypt. As to his throwing stone, it seems to be the one that slays the old sun, represented as a moose or deer. My thought is that the three-striped stone indicates the Son of Man arriving at the right hand of the Father, just as Aleph at the Tav indicates God. Dad came to Mom, Aleph at the Tav. No, the Etruscan god of war is not riding the strangest saddle ever made. He's reaching back with his left arm to grab a sword sheathed at the right leg of his steed. And the thing is, in ancient cultures, Orion was the rider of the horse, the rider of Pegasus. So the sword he's grabbing is probably what the Mississippians would have called Redhorn, the day Pegasus flips over and heads west. It's the day a comet of bloody tears is supposed to rise from Venus. The god of war to be in a position to make that order is Mars, driving the Aquarian age when the sky turns around for a bit. I suspect the item he is reaching for as the sun goes out is the new sun that reportedly starts out dim, probably due to incoming interstellar debris and smoke. Hence that confusing time of darkness. On the left, you have a Gnostic version of how it went last time. A serpent climbed up over the head of Anu or Geb the bull, the reigning god, 6,000 years ago. The tusk of Ganesh went from North Pole to South. In Minoan Greece, it was seen as the time when Taurus swung his head and the axe of Auriga separated the people. The North America version was the Thunderbird White Eagle as the axe, and the one doing the swinging was Aries or Mars in Aquarius. I believe the Aries triangle is being used as a double entendre for the serpent, temporarily thrown down before he rises up like Nehushtan. See Numbers 21, Eyes on the Serpent. Half a precession ago, he was the cornerstone rejected by the builders. Tomorrow, he'll take the place of the dragon uh, for the past 12,500 years. I really believe the object of some of the rocks is for you to step back and realize that there's truth in the light and in the shadows. For instance, on the right, the rock is showing the gentle curves of Thunderbird's wings, but the shadow in the light enclosed by the serpent rising, there's a tit in the triangle, or in other words, the first point of Aries, and there's an eagle descending. And this is hardly unique. Stones from Israel or Libya will tell you the same thing as this Mississippian piece. Bottom left, you have a phoenix or dragon or thunderbird. Top left, what's that painted there? The Fenris wolf? Seth? Anubis? Same rock, shows an eagle or Greek gamma or Hebrew vav or a reversal. But it's an interesting theological position to be in, realizing these are all faces of God. It should have been panim instead of pane in the Aaronic blessing of number 6, of which I love verse 27, by the way. It could be significant. The way up and the way down is still the same way. Isaiah 45:7 or 41:23. My apologies to the natives of Oxfordshire, but note the way they dug Pegasus into the chalk lines 3,000 years ago is a double entendre. If you look at it right, it's a dragon or phoenix flying west when the world goes upside down and backward. In the future, they'll call it the Uffington Dragon. Here you can see the older guy is wearing the crown of Baal to be thrown down by his son, trying to trip him up, perhaps to get to Mom, Queen of Heaven, the horse or lioness in the background, which could imply something for Leo or Pegasus. And she's wearing, she's on a chair, which I think also implies Cassiopeia. The date is around the end of May. Jupiter will be supplanted as he wanted to do to Saturn. It's a double elimination tournament, I think. There's lots of tree and feather imagery that lead me to believe that the tree of life was basically the pole of the New Age. The question is one of your mythology. Who do you see as the red star or blue star? Who is Aquarius or Orion or Leo? They're all involved in this crazy time that religion is going to tell you is all about a monotheistic God of light ordering about his dualistic angel of darkness who commands legion stars and asteroids, all of whom are expected to get into a ruckus this year. In which vision does Mr. Putin's grand design make more than a sandcastle in a rising tide? In the grand scheme of things, he'll have accelerated some deaths in the global do-over. The security of his lands will be lost, his $1.4 billion villa, an awesome place to gather spiderwebs. I think they call this the Steel of Ur-Nammu, founder of the third dynasty of Ur, author of the first legal code, for which we have more than a mention. But when I looked at it, don't you see a tree of life Asherah sort of thing there in the middle, and a king who has measured the universe in the east, and somebody holding a plow for a scepter in the position of a triangle while sitting on a diamond? Doesn't that imply like an equinox or even a summer solstice? I mean, that kind of proximity of spring and August is weird. Same guy holding the beam and its timing. And the world has spun so that the elder god, who had been Saturn Shamash on the right, is now bringing water to the tree of life from the west, also serving as a constellation, perhaps to retire and let his son do the heavy lifting. And since the goings on in heaven usually take place zodiacally from right to left, wouldn't that mean a beam before the flood? The place to watch for excitement is going to be where Phoenix follows Raven around April 30th. I believe it's the midpoint in the roll, and things should get going here in just a few days. Check out references in the Bible to 40 and to 70 because I think they're prophetic. You might recall Moses telling the people of Nineveh, or no, not Moses, Jonah telling the people of Nineveh they had 40 days to repent, and then Yahweh was going to wipe them out. I believe he counted the 40 days from the vernal equinox, which gets you to the end of April. And I believe the 70 was concurrent and would take you to when Jupiter and Mars duke it out for having the same girlfriend, which would get you to about 9 July. Before Venus gets to Jupiter, she has to cross Aquarius with Mars, and the ancients said she and Mars end up with an ornery set of twins as a result. Last creation, their boys Remus and Romulus. Saturn and Jupiter were duking it out in Gemini. Since Mars and Venus are currently getting it on in front of ugly old husband Saturn, Vulcan, and Capricorn, I would expect the sky to light up in the next couple of weeks. Though whether it's with plasma or the expected meteor storm, I can't tell you. Anyway, the lovers made quite a mess of things. You find their famous affair in Homer's Odyssey, Book 8, Ovid's Metamorphoses, Book 4, the Ars Amatoria, Book 2, Shakespeare's first play, Venus and Adonis. I guess Shakespeare was making Mars the successor to Jupiter after Yod gets sacrificed by Saturn or Jupiter takes the throne by regicide. Anyway, if that makes sense, start keeping an eye on Mars because he's being thought of as the analog to Red Star's big moment. I'm not sure to what civilization the sun god refers to, but since the Inca controlled the west coast of South America and the peace resides in Ecuador, I'm thinking it's Inca gold, showing us to beware the Ides of March, which is like now. There's something about that nose and the first point of Aries when the new age begins. Since that landmark is just days away, maybe we should care. The Minoan axe is indicative of the Taurus sky, the swinging of the zodiac at this time, and the presence of two moons. The eye god from Syria is a simple icon for this time at the fall of Aquarius. I believe the little Hongshan owl says the heron descends on the new house to grab his serpent, and the roll begins. When you begin to see turbulence from the seas, including tsunami, take a trip inland for a couple of months. This thing is not going to calm down for weeks. You saw the same image as I did of the visitor stars on February 1st. I don't believe they get to the other side of their original hourglass track with their trajectories intact, that they'll reverse and get spun around. The Mississippian eagle suggests that somehow Eagle will be ascendant as his brother banks south. But as I've indicated on the little sun disk, that situation also reverses. What the two brought to mind was a story Jesus used to tell about the beam and the mote. He suggested that for things to go right, the beam comes before the mote, the great light before the darkness. So I guess we'll see. Expect Medusa's super flare about the same time. The Sibylline oracle says, fire shall come flashing forth in the broad heaven, and many cities burn and men destroy, and much black ashes shall fill the great sky, and small drops like red earth shall fall from heaven. For that they without reasons shall destroy the nation of the pious. And then strife awakened of war shall come to the west. Here are a few signs from around the world that lead me to believe we're in a heap of trouble. The requisite years have gone by, and over on Joseph 1964's page, we saw the windows of heaven opening. This means reversal. We won't be far behind. On the Sasanian seal, you can see the roast boar getting sacrificed by Saturn and Jupiter. Their swords are the staves framing the new house of the Zodiac in Pisces and Capricorn. The little Russian cross shows the time of the two creators. Hands depicted as serpents are a very ancient sign known around the world for two creators. Similarly, the Mesopotamian tablet shows the action beginning the flood between Jupiter and Saturn, between blue star and red star. The Mayan image similarly shows sacrifice and rebirth at the time Phoenix climbs above Bull of Heaven. And I honestly believe that happens in the next 6 weeks. Did you see how Aquarius, the tree of life, has been smushed at the bottom like a wilted dragon? The Roman ring shows this time when we shall have two simultaneous eclipses, April 30th, and Raven stands with the wings fighting the wind that day in the boat of the sun. I imagine the coin is from somewhere in ancient Greece, but note the symbol of Aries leads when Heron dives. The first point of Aries begins with Sun's passage of that point next week. But I don't think things go critical for a few more weeks. The oracle said, do not trust the sun at that point. So in other words, the sun is not your prophet. So wait, of lying Phoebus, whom vain men called God, and further falsified by calling seer. The time we're waiting for is just a little longer. The shepherd has not yet arrived his place. Redhorn Heshuka told us, note the equinox on his hat and the multiple stars of creation on his back. He was sometimes called he who wears men's faces on his ears, and that was referring to Saturn and Jupiter flanking the reigning house at the time of his appearance. As morning star Venus wore a red star, a beast shall rise in the east and will marvel. Time to read Revelation 13 if you've the time. At the same time the earth fire lights up, we shall see Redhorn and his opposite number, the dragon, as a blue horn. Pillars of smoke during the day, fire at night. Plasma physics on a peaceful planet. Symbols for what's coming are literally everywhere. The Bible is death on ancient imagery, and yet I'm getting the feeling that the one thing that was always sacred to depict was imagery hinting about our past that comes again when humanity gets too big for its britches. Whenever there is a falling away from the true law and an upsurge of unlawfulness, then I emit myself. I come into being age after age to protect the virtuous and to destroy the evildoers, to establish a firm basis for the true law, Bhagavad Gita 4. Don't mind the eagle dragon on the upper right, it's from a movie, but I think the chimeras of this time explain something of this mess that we're in. There's going to be more radiation. There's going to be all kinds of destruction. There's going to be all sorts of new combinations of DNA out there. And it's going to get together in crazy ways. We need to consider that one culture's bull of heaven could be another's dragon, another's thunderbird, another's killer whale, another's Yahweh. And just as others will remember a tree of life, that is the feather of truth and the sign of the mother, and we can get literal about the symbologies after the mud dries and the ash settles. A generation of teachers will be sent to civilize the world after the great anarchy that's being cooked up by the Sanhedrin, the Vatican, Mecca, and the Masons. They all want to do their part, apparently. More science, the ancients knew what's going on in the time of the Phoenix. Note that first point of Aries on the funny-looking Roadrunner. Didn't we see that dotted triangle on the Jesus tomb and that of some of his followers? And is that a serpent on the phoenix's head or the trunk of a mastodon? The diamond of Virgo is beneath his wings. So again, we're near a time of the equinoxes. Here you have the Hongshan, the Bactrians, and the people of Luristan trying to warn you of an event pending in Pegasus. The unusual sphinx is from the ancient Celtiberians of Spain. It's called the Beast of Balasote. I think its ancient message is that we will meet our God when the great horse sports a lion's tail, and I'm pretty sure they were right. The Mississippian stone shows the birth of a new sun rising from between the legs of the goddess Aquarius in the time of a solar flare. Scientists have been registering some concern about the M-class flares being tossed in this direction, which is to say there's no reason to think our grid can keep going when the mega X-class flares come straight at us in a few weeks in serious blazes to take out the North in our reversal. When Beast rises and Dragon appears, don't be too impressed that suddenly God or the Christ has shown up just to make your day. Remember, it says you don't get to see his face and live. So you can choose to be deep underground with the president's cabinet and the generals at Raven Rock, or you can fly out of here on the wings of eagles. Don't go with the glory, and you can still say the right thing in the concentration camp to find your way to heaven. Luke 12, Matthew 10:39 or 19:29, Mark 13:13, John 15:21, Acts 9:16, and Revelation 7:14 come to mind, which to me means that the day we see him, we'll be a bunch of crispy critters at the last place on earth Jesus wanted us to be. How many times did he have to tell us, get out of Babylon, steer clear of the wilderness. You'll be needed in Israel before you know it. It's like the Hopi prophecy. They said mankind would build a gourd of ashes, nuclear weapons, and the nation first to use it would end up on the receiving end. So what do Putin and Biden think they're up to with all their sword rattling? Playing sock puppets of Mars and Aquarius? Looking to accomplish Armageddon before time runs out? Oh, to be an avenging angel or demon in this time. They're going to have such a blast. What I love about President Zelensky is the man knows how to tell the truth, even when nobody wants to hear it. Somehow I hope the new world down here remembers him as a saint, but that would likely involve the disintegration of the empire's entire infrastructure. If your coming Son of Man can do all that, he gets my vote. In the meantime, there's an old bald guy thinking he's the hand of God. Woe to us all. We've talked about the hourglass and the movement of the poles. I believe we found the mechanism of how pole shift can happen quickly, with just a change in polarity. I imagine our North Pole can also get dragged around as our stars of creation fly past each other in a shared electromagnetic field. Though the Earth's poles aren't usually susceptible to what's flying around the neighborhood, like sun reverses its pole every 11 years and doesn't seem to bother us. And yet here we are at a long prophesied event in which something huge is about to take place, like a new heaven and a new earth. And I'm thinking it has to do with our planet's dynamo flying through this Birkeland current between the stars of creation. You're about to feel very different. You will hear a tune you've never heard before. The planet will rumble as never before. The sky will roar like a lion. Can you imagine people's reaction when it dawns on them that apocalypse is at hand? It's going to be nuts as far as they can drive. You might recall when I told you I wasn't sure if the Saturn was the one on the eclipse sun was left because the rock was a stamp or whether it showed a real reversal. Well, either that's the day the spaceships come to get us, which is doubtful, or that's Saturn in the west on both stones where he's not supposed to be. It turns out the rock on your right is not a stamp for pressing into clay. It's a true image, which means the Earth turns over on its head from our perspective. I don't know if you can see Wile E. Coyote playing Wizard of Oz behind Operation Bluebeam, but people are going to be fooled by whatever light show Seth Anubis has cooked up for the big sacrifice. I just take it as our time of judgment. Remember in the Book of Job, chapter 2, verse 1, there's a day when all the sons of God go on parade review, and even Satan gets to come out to march. And my thought is that April 30th should be the day. It's, kind of special because if red star is in the foreground and blue star is in the background, at a time the sun and moon are also eclipsing, I believe the red star, with its dark side to us, will simultaneously light up the dark one behind it, casting a mark on him, which will suddenly turn the world against anyone seen as worshiping that mark. By this time, we will have seen two words of Yahweh, two great menorah in the sky, and I'm thinking Earth is ripe for the harvest. There's another booster out there for the lemmings to think they've staved off death. Wish them luck for me. Personally, God could do absolutely anything in the way of showing humanity the door, and I'm way older than my years, but I'll race you to the Stargate. By the way, the little boxcars, the Maya and the Anunnakis that are coming for us are not the Stargate to graduation. They're like a COVID shot, so you can stick around, fly around until the dust settles, then join the cleanup crew for rebuilding civilization. Uh, Jeremiah 30, verse 3, I think. I'm told you have to have good DNA for the ride, and I've seen the Legion defects in my DNA tests, so I'm not counting on it. Scientists don't have an explanation for how civilization suddenly took off in 5000 BC. The truth is, it didn't. It took us 600 years to try to get the place set up to how we had it before God's previous weenie roast in 4415 BC. Sorry, I really like the picture that goes with the story on how Earth's core is turning to mush and our planet's magnetic field is dropping to zero before the reversal. Supervolcanoes and great earthquakes happen at these quarter, half, and precessional dates. The reason is the RAM cycle of history that we forgot. Exceptional drought has been seen in 6 states so far: New Mexico, Oklahoma, Utah, Nevada, Montana, and Oregon. If pole shift carries the ice cap to southwest Alaska, is that like me moving suddenly to British Columbia, where my Sinixt and Okanagan ancestors used to live? Weather patterns will definitely be changing, but I'm afraid most of us won't be here to see it. This is so true. I just can't tell you. One warhead from Messier's Putin or Xi or his expendable Korean crony could take down the North American grid as easily as the sun. And, it's due to happen in the next few weeks, regardless of what they do. When the power goes down, you really won't know what did it unless you just watch Los Angeles go up in smoke. Somebody's elites think this place will go out with barely a whimper, but I know a few people who won't take kindly to anyone trying to come in and take charge. Watch for changes in the earth. They're already happening. For instance, it appears our usual seismic monitors aren't geared up for the long wave events that are already happening. I wish I knew what frequency is resonating with the earth that the seismologists forgot to track. The usual Schumann resonances are 4, 7.83, 14, 20, 26, 33, 39, 45, and 59 hertz. The basic sound of the universe, they say, is the sound of creation, the Om, 432 hertz. Today, we would call it the Do from your Do, Re, Mi, Solfeggio. Middle C on your piano. Earlier music notations had it as the Ut or the G, an octave and a half below middle C, but the earth is about to sound like we've never heard it before. I always wondered, what would be some ingenious signs for a God of truth spoken of in Deuteronomy, Psalms, Isaiah, Esdras, John, and Paul, truth being the level playing field for judging reality, where everything connects. And the answer I eventually came up with is the same as Matthew Perry's in Fools Rush In. The signs are everywhere. So take, for example, this sound of creation for the Hindus and Buddhists, Om. When the core gives up and Earth's crust slides, it's written in Sanskrit as an eagle followed by a phoenix beneath an eclipse. In music, that's a C clef writing again, an eagle getting his serpent at the first point of Aries, which sounds to me a lot like 30 April, first point of Aries being a place, not a date. The low register would then be middle C, which was called the gamut, which written in hieroglyph would be Mom the owl at the first point of Aries beneath a half sun. If you then look up gamut in your Middle Egyptian dictionary, you find it means the black ibis, Thoth, one born directly from the lips of Ra, a god without a mother. And how does Jesus compare himself to John the Baptist? Among those that are born of women, there is not a greater prophet than John the Baptist, but he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Luke 7:28. So John the Baptist was the best man, and Jesus, his younger cousin, was here in another capacity. I think he was trying to clear up Deuteronomy 18, where there's a prophet like God and there's a prophet like us. Christianity is either the logical answer to Judaism or it's the flip side, a theological booby prize. And time will tell. My hope is that it's the merciful answer for a sinful world. Well, I'm just a retired old guy with a rock collection and some books. If my place isn't good enough for survival, well, I probably won't. I just won't have the time or energy to dig a cave, and the local quarry is not going to rent me the cave where they keep the explosives. But that'd be a way to go. Anyway, I wish these folks with money for bunkers well. I've seen this sort of thing done right, and it would take far, far more than I'm ever going to have, especially after they kick up the inflation another 20% and begin checking off implementation of the insane executive orders. Have you ever seen the list of executive powers they hand over to people whose sole qualification for world power is their ability to spend your money? I mean, they're nuts. The American Constitution will prove itself one more terribly fragile thing we failed to get right in our lead up to Armageddon. The interagency will take over where they leave off, no matter how many layers of the American system just got destroyed. And it really won't matter who the new guy or gal in charge is. What emerges won't be life as we knew it growing up. There is, of course, some concern with the current course of events scripted 11 years ago, all prelude to a third world war in which the powers that be are convinced that tossing around radioactive unthinkables will be the order of the day. It's a little more mayhem when there's an apocalypse afoot and ample excuse to squander trillions of dollars and billions of lives. So now they're bombing nuclear power plants and continuing the religious war and genocide that began in 1917. The Bible says there will be lots of fasting in the coming days for all of us. So Ukraine is a foreshadowing of what's on the agenda for America, Germany, the UK, and Israel. I sometimes wonder what branch of the Sethian religion Lenin, Stalin, and their 450 imported apparatchiks could have come from before they took control of the Kremlin and opened up the Gulag archipelago. Because they surely didn't love Christians or Slavs who already had a Trinity and their own Book of the Dead when they inherited the Bible. And where does Mr. Putin stand on the earlier foreign and domestic policies of Russia and the Soviet Union? Will he be a good conqueror, or is he really headed to Israel for Armageddon, as the Bible states? I'd be shocked if he hasn't already made plans to join the Chinese in their bid for the Middle East, but perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Control of the planet goes to who can capture resources near one of the pillars of the Earth, the part of the planet that stays relatively calm. Herodotus said the Mediterranean area suffered and survived two falls of the earth in 11,340 years. History 2, section 142. The same priests of Egypt told Solon that Atlantis, which today we know to be America, at the same time went under the waves. Plato's Critias and Timaeus tell the tale. I did the clay slab based on the early Hebrew inscriptions at Wadi al-Hol. I didn't realize the head wound to the old god was essential for the staff of Orion. But remember when we saw the three suns coming to Aquarius' left hand on February 1st, hence the lion's paw in E.T.'s hand, uh, Et's hand. So I'm pretty sure we're in the season of things starting over. In Deuteronomy 28, I found an interesting name for Yahweh Elohim. It was Yahuwah Eloheka, which contains the Egyptian word of creation and magic, Heka. As you can see on the top line of hieroglyph on the right, you have Hashem for the name, and it has a representation of dad and mom, both implicit in the name. And the second box of the hieroglyph is the phonetic way to spell Eloheka in hieroglyph, though they tended to use the one bottom center for Heka. Note that it implies DNA and the stars of creation in the hands of Aquarius, and Dad coming in on the vernal equinox or the vernal vertical axis. Jerusalem Post had an interesting article about this new display of a very old stone. My guess would be that it represents a prophecy or our quick shift in 10,500 BC and 4415 BC. Reminds me of the Bishop dragon stones of Armenia that go back 5,000 years. I told the museum's curator I thought it would be very prophetic, and she probably thinks I'm nuts. Anyway, I included the Mississippian stones on the bottom to show you the Egyptians are not the only ones who expected the dragon to be slain by the lion. It's the way this thing goes. The lion, I guess, is the one that's really, really close to the sun, on the ecliptic, and then the dragon is coming in on that vertical figure eight that we saw. It's the way this thing goes. So the question is whether the lioness will be on top for the next 12,000 years, and whether that's what's intended by Revelation 13:4, or will the roll take 3.5 years as hinted by the times and a half of Daniel 12:7? And if that were the case, perhaps the coastal populations could have time to adjust. This might be the best prophetic rock I've seen. It says your king is coming, and it provides you a window of time. The little Sasanian gem is just to show you that the uraeus on the pharaoh's cap is a huge deal. The serpent must rise, and the sun's absolutely going to freak out when it does. If you look closely at the very top, you have the hint of an eagle getting his serpent. A red horn rising with the serpent in the northwest made the Egyptian hieroglyph alphabet as a letter N. Interestingly, the curlicue of the uraeus at the pharaoh's cap implied in the letter the heart of heaven. Time for the avatars and a wedding and everything else. If you get the chance, acquaint yourself with the book of Ezekiel. He wrote of the miseries of this time. I'm thinking that might be why, as people go into this collective and horrible chaos before the new order, traditional religion will be popular in some circles and wildly not in others. For example, this week, I think it was Emma Watson came out for All the Witches at the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. My impression is that we're in for more polarization along every cultural barrier. It's obviously the goal. A pretext for evil will be had by all when the sword of Apollo ignites the earth fire, as if we all got bopped on the head by God and told to go out and be an angel or a demon, as if the current Dems versus Republicans thing wasn't bad enough. What I've been trying to tell you is that this is the time for which religion and myth had to be invented. Beyond sex, food, and air, the time of an extinction level event is like the most important thing to get right for the survival of the species. And the way things are going, we couldn't possibly get this thing right, even if we all held hands. No, this thing is beyond human control, but definitely to be remembered. So the first guy they can credibly call God or Christ or Mahdi or Kalki, guess what? It will be the sort of night worship at Rome as when Hitler and Mussolini threw a bonfire parade, an instant trip to the dark side. Someday, some poor demigod is going to single-handedly cobble together history in a way that makes moral sense out of our cosmic mess, and it will be the once and future religion of all humanity, at which point the world's leaders and religions can fall in step and learn to get along. Until then, Shema bless you and keep you, now and forever. And by the way, if you've been waiting, stand by for all the prophecies to be fulfilled in your lifetime. It might take 4 years, but the worst of it will be over long before then. Take care.